at the moment," the Imperial Saint said gravely as he began drumming his fingers on the thick, padded armrest of his seat. "I am willing to agree. The Republic is in a superior position," he admitted, the tone in his voice almost sagging with reluctance. Samael watched from his leaned-back position on his own chair, an inscrutable expression etched onto his large features. He took a long, deliberate drag of his cigarette, the ember glowing brightly in the dim light. Exhaling slowly, he spoke low, as if paying more attention to the gears in his head than the conversation. "It doesn't do us any good to dance around the obvious," he growled with a nod of his head. He gestured towards the Republic's side of the open-air table, his eyes tense on the people who had come to strike a bargain. Leaning back against his chair, as if stress-testing the squeaking, groaning furniture, he exhaled a stream of blue smoke that wafted upward, swirling into the warped space of the repulsor canopy. The smoke hung suspended for several seconds, almost as if held captive by the tension filling the space. Mago Sigma sat straight, uncomfortably straight by the estimate of the Republic delegates who eyed her, her posture steel rigid in her seat beside the Imperial Saint, her back never touching the backrest.
"Affirmative,"
she said in response to Samael's words.
"Understanding is held. We're surrounded, outnumbered, and cut off from help. Debate us not on the facts of the situation, for understanding is held."
She droned, cold eyes watching the assembled group through glassy perspectives.
"With understanding, we may begin,"
she stated to those seated around the table. Commissar Leross sat rigidly, her gaze fixed on the bleak landscape beyond the heads and shoulders of the Republic delegation. Her scarred features were twisted into a scowl, a map of battles fought and survived, indicating more conflict yet to come. She grunted, her voice gravelly, as if dredged from the depths of her chest. She turned her head to orient towards those across from her, her eyes narrowing as she focused on Ahsoka Tano. The scars on her cheeks seemed to deepen, etching harsh details into her skin as she began to speak.
"The only understanding I need is that we are only here due to the promise of recovering our soldiers."
Her growl sent a ripple through the air, a subtle warning that her patience, if indeed she had any, was already wearing thin at the mere sight of a creature like the former Padawan.
"So, let's get this over with. You should begin with your demands, witch,"
she finished, sneering at Ahsoka. Ahsoka Tano, the once devoted apprentice of Anakin Skywalker, drew a measured breath, her gaze sweeping the assembled faces, smothering a near wince as her eyes gazed over the skull mask of Saint Lazarus. She leaned forward, her eyes searching for the signs of the hidden agendas of those around her. She would have opened, but a nudge at her elbow had her leaning back, letting Obi-Wan take the lead in the negotiations.
"Demands? Such harsh words. Despite present circumstances, I am hoping that we can engage in negotiation, not in the exchange of raw demands,"
Obi-Wan replied with a disarming nod, drawing Leross's attention to him. "We'll see," Samael chuckled, evident amusement in his voice as he watched the Jedi Master take control. Obi-Wan ignored the large man's comment, continuing.
"Of course, in all negotiations there is an element of give and take. First, to start off these talks for a ceasefire, we ask that all Republic prisoners be released back to us immediately after the conclusion of this meeting,"
he finished. Ahsoka leaned forward again, this time speaking and drawing the focus back to her as she voiced her own condition.
"And the civilians as well. We won't leave them behind,"
she added with no small urgency. Obi-Wan glanced at her, nodding in agreement.
"Yes, indeed. The civilian prisoners must also be included as well,"
he insisted, turning to the Imperial Saint, awaiting his response. Lazarus inhaled deeply, his expression unreadable behind the eldritch skull mask he wore. He intertwined his fingers, forming a steeple on the table, and briefly closed his eyes, weighing the proposal. As he opened them again, a hint of some emotion flickered in his gaze. With a cautious jerk of his head, he began to speak. "If we release all our prisoners and you only return half of yours, we'll be left with nothing to negotiate with. That's not a compromise. It's submission. And no matter where we find ourselves, I can never be made to submit," he said, each word spoken like a verbal stone. "And so, I'm afraid the answer is no," Lazarus said with finality, his eyes narrow behind the skull sockets of his mask.
I see.
Obi-Wan stretched his fingers over the chair's arms, taking a moment to reposition himself, casually making himself more comfortable.
I understand your point, and I agree,
he said easily, the words almost making the Imperial Saint rock back in surprise.
Perhaps we can come to a more agreeable compromise then. What if you were to keep a few prisoners of war for this exchange?
Obi-Wan offered, leaning forward.
Master.
Ahsoka growled under her breath. Lazarus ignored Ahsoka, leaning closer to meet Obi-Wan instead. "I'm listening. How many are you suggesting?" he asked, mirroring the Jedi as if unwilling to even cede the table between them. Obi-Wan's hand instinctively rose, palm facing Ahsoka, signaling her to remain patient as they pressed on. His eyes, however, locked onto Lazarus' skull-like features, refusing to yield, even to the growing discomfort that the item was quickly generating. The air thickened, heavy with tension, as Obi-Wan's gaze met Lazarus' unyielding stare.
1/5?
The Republic's Jedi negotiator in these proceedings put forward. He said it with an easy expression, one he did not feel at all. Within Obi-Wan's mind, a storm brewed, a dull ache beginning to pulse at the base of his skull, threatening to unleash a full-blown migraine for every moment he stared into the Saint's odd death mask. The familiar, maddening whisper crept into his mind, a cold, dead voice that seemed to seep from the shimmering bones themselves. Obi-Wan's discipline-honed instincts pushed back against the encroaching darkness, the dead voice screaming at the edges of his thoughts. Meanwhile, the Saint across from him frowned and shook his head. "Half. I will not settle for less than half," Lazarus countered. Obi-Wan scrunched his face and raised one eyebrow, his expression speaking for his incredulity.
Absolutely not,
he said, his voice tainted by a light chuckle.
As you said, the advantage is ours, St. Lazarus. I'm willing to negotiate as a gesture of goodwill. However, as has already been voiced by your own side, it helps nobody to pretend things are not the way they are.
The Jedi stated plainly. "Naturally." Samael growled under his breath as Lazarus leaned in to respond. "We could give you more, and destroy a certain portion of those we retain, if that suits you better," the Saint spat. Ahsoka's eyes practically shone with a sudden, violent inclination, her fists clenching.
If you do that, then we'll just be forced to come to their rescue sooner, even if that means blowing you all up.
She hissed, slamming her palms down and rising. "Silence, witch!" Commissar Leros barked back, the fist of her unpowered gauntlet slamming down like a thick club upon the already dented surface of the table. Obi-Wan sat back in his seat. Although he looked unperturbed, the vein along the side of his head indicated a greater stress than he was willing to portray.
My colleague, though obtuse, is correct. By choosing to destroy the prisoners in your care, you will be condemning yourselves. We cannot agree to a ceasefire while knowing its price is directly paid in the blood of our own. Nor would we expect you to agree to such a ceasefire as well.
The Jedi stated flatly. Silence fell over the table as each person waited for someone to break the stalemate. Ahsoka and Leros glared death at each other, each one still standing over the table. Ahsoka supported by both hands, Leros supported on the knuckles of her massive gauntlet, her free hand gripping the bolt pistol holstered at her side. Commander Rex's breath shuddered in a muffled hiss from his helmet, hand tightening over the grip of his weapon, barely managing to keep the muzzle of it aimed down as he blinked red tears from his hidden eyes. Finally, Lazarus shattered the silence, his voice rising in the tension like a buoyant balloon sinking upwards through syrup. Do you believe these threats will cow us? Stop us? Do you think we are not ready to die? He began, only to be abruptly cut off by Jocasta Nu, her elderly rebuke scything through his counter.
And do you?
She asked pointedly.
You seem to be laboring under the misconception that we'll do any less than you, and will respond any differently to your threats on the lives of our people. Allow me to disabuse you of that notion now. We came here in good faith, but we will not be threatened. Any overt action to pointlessly kill those of us that you have in your custody will be paid back immediately and overwhelmingly.
She stated with an air of wizened finality. Samael nodded his head to this, acknowledging her point even if he said nothing to it. The slender woman, Hecate, leaned forward and whispered something into his ear, then chuckling as he waved her off with his large hand a second later. Jocasta's expression softened somewhat, and she continued.
So, let none of us be hasty. We are about the business of saving lives, each of us.
Jocasta Nu finished. Her eyes flashed between each member of the opposing side, fixing them with a sobering gaze as she continued.
If we leave this meeting without a resolution or without the binding promise of a ceasefire, then the subsequent actions from all involved will be direct, uncompromising, and needlessly costly.
The older woman emphasized, her hands folded in her lap in a gesture of civility that played powerfully at odds with what she was implying.
Then we will pay the cost! We will die in battle!
Shouted Commissar Leros in response, her face like a storm.
Then you will die as fools.
Ahsoka snapped back. She pointed skywards where 3 black and gray wedges stood stationary high in the sky.
If you're going to just start killing our prisoners, then we might as well finish it all quickly and spare anyone any more fighting. If you force us to, we'll just blow you away from orbit. No battle, no glory, no further casualties for us. Just a big hole in the street to serve as a grave for the rest of you.
Ahsoka bluffed angrily. Obi-Wan raised his arm, smothering a smile behind his left hand. Capturing the Basilica was the primary objective of the Republic. Blowing it up was out of the question. However, the Imperials didn't need to know that, and from the way Leros seemed to flounder at a response, it was clear that they didn't know better. A good bluff, and one he did not expect from her. His throat, forcing back his feelings on the matter and reasserting control of his expression.
2/3 of our soldiers in return for the half you are being given for attending. That's my final offer. Otherwise, we'll give you only as much time as you need to return to the walls of your temple, where you can spend your final moments in prayer.
Obi-Wan said, voice calm but strong. Lazarus gritted his teeth, lines cut deeply behind his masked face. He waved angrily at the Commissar, and when she reluctantly sat down, he looked at the Jedi Master across from him and gave one jerky nod. 2/3. It is agreed. He grunted.
And all the civilians.
Ahsoka insisted, drawing a vicious glare from the Saint, the power of his skull mask making her wince. Ahsoka shook off the effects with a scowl of her own, still standing, her hands pressed firmly against the table.
All of them.
She demanded, her eyes hard and her voice full of her unyielding objective. Lazarus stared at Ahsoka as if she were insane. We are about to make a deal, and this witch is getting in the way over concerns for civilians. Can you reel your beast in so that we may actually get somewhere? Lazarus spat. The Jedi Master shook his head.
No, I don't think I will. In fact, though I would phrase it less stringently, I do agree with her condition.
He said, stroking his chin. Ahsoka sat back, crossing her arms and smiling smugly. Lazarus, on the other hand, looked like he might leap over the table and attempt to stab the Republic delegate a second time. Then, he growled through clenched teeth. Would you care to explain why, in the face of what you were espousing before, you will now demand this of us? The Saint spat back at the Jedi.
Because,
Obi-Wan said, straightening and folding his hands in front of himself.
the civilians you have in custody are not part of this. You have no purpose in keeping them. If anything, this is an opportunity to unburden yourselves of the manpower and resources expenditure that these prisoners represent. Why not release them when they are a bigger drain than a help to you?
He asked amicably. Does the Republic really stand by this outrageous demand? Lazarus returned harshly. Obi-Wan shrugged.
It's hardly outrageous. Civilians are innocent bystanders and should not be involved in these matters. If we could identify any civilians among those of you whom we have captured, we would extend the same courtesy.
The Jedi Master explained.
Oh, truly?
Commissar Lyros asked with the most unpleasant, false smile that Kenobi had ever seen, one which quickly transformed into a hate-filled sneer.
Did you extend that courtesy to the men, women, and children of the Atlas of Steel?
She asked, jabbing a large metal finger in the air towards the Jedi in an accusatory gesture. Ahsoka shrank back and, instead of responding, looked to Obi-Wan, a sign of weakness which Lyros noticed and pounced on.
Nothing to say for yourself, alien?
The Commissar spat.
No,
Ahsoka began, but Obi-Wan stood and cut her off. His eyes blazed, and his expression lined, emphasizing his feelings about the subject before even speaking a word.
If I am correct in assuming that the Atlas of Steel is the first ship encountered by the Rathonian Defense Fleet and the Jedi Commander there, then I have only these three things to say. Firstly, none of those present and in power at this meeting were in any way related to those events. I and Master Nu did not know of the existence of any fleet actions around Pazab, and Ahsoka was not even in the employ of the Republic at that time.
He stated firmly. Lyros opened her mouth to speak, but his next sentence came too quickly and too forcefully.
Second, this ceasefire concerns the events and forces around Axum. I will not make judgments or base my conditions and concessions on an event that I know next to nothing about. Bring it up again if you must, but I have said my piece concerning it, and I will not factor it into these talks.
The Jedi Master continued. Awfully convenient, that. Samael said with a sneer. You commit full genocide against millions of civilians, and you don't even... He began to go on, but Obi-Wan cut through his voice with his own.
3. Though this has not been agreed to by my government, I personally, as Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi, offer you my sincere condolences for your loss, and, more than that, this.
He said as he slipped a holodisc out of his robe and slid it across the table to where Samael sat. The large man reached out, stopping the spinning disc with a finger, and as he pulled it back, a hologram began to play. Upon it was the miniature image of the obscure deck of a Venator Star Destroyer, staffed with clones, a single tall-headed alien scientist, and a reptilian, robed Jedi. Only the figures were clear and distinct, the environment reduced to gray blurs.
Is it going to attempt a landing?
The alien Jedi asked one of the clones, who was bent over his smudged console, eyes narrow as he evidently manipulated the controls.
I don't... Sir, one of the ships of the fleet is not obeying the muster at our lines.
The clone officer reported, voice raising in alarm.
What? Who?
The Jedi hissed, head swiveling somewhat as he stepped toward the clone.
It's the Bellajaw, sir.
The clone officer called out, looking up at the Jedi, eyes wide with confusion.
Captain Kraken?
The green, scaly warrior asked, slitted eyes blinking rapidly a couple of times.
Hail him!
He ordered a moment later. There was a pause then, a moment where orders were followed and actions, not words, took the stage. The scientist on the deck, the almost cone-headed humanoid, was bent over the blobbish console of one of the clones, reading what was on it over the officer's shoulder. But, as the pause stretched and stretched, the scaled Jedi grew more and more impatient.
Well, is he responding?
He asked after a time, agitation clear in his voice.
No, sir,
was the quick reply from the clone. His sentence almost clipped off as Samael pressed his fingers against the top of the device again, causing the image and audio to freeze.
What is this?
Lazarus asked from beside the big man. Samael answered before the Jedi managed to.
It is, ostensibly, a recording of what happened aboard the commander's ship just prior to that attack on the Atlas of Steel.
He clarified, raising an eyebrow towards Obi-Wan, giving an opening for the Jedi to correct him, but Master Kenobi only nodded his head.
Thank you,
Samael said, picking the device up and handing it off to Hecate, not sparing her a glance as she flicked and juggled the holodisc between her fingers and hands before letting it drop into one of the pockets of her long black coat.
I hope that, for the moment, this will serve to prove my personal commitment to these talks. That, while I and my order will reckon with the events on that recording, this is not the time or the place. Not if it is in anyone's intention to actually work towards this ceasefire.
Obi-Wan stated, moving his eyes between each of them, the orbs now bloodshot from the constant exposure to St. Lazarus' skull mask. Lazarus himself sat back, his synthetic leather-bound chair creaking softly beneath him as he sighed deeply. His troubled eyes drifted downward, his gaze losing focus as he pondered Obi-Wan's words. Lazarus' gaze gradually lifted, his eyes sliding upwards and to the side, drawn to the imposing figure sitting beside him. The Inquisitor, a towering behemoth of intrigue, authority, and menace, loomed over him even while sitting down, as though Lazarus himself was nothing but his shadow. Somehow that made the Inquisitor's presence both more reassuring and unnerving. The faint glow of the slender woman's eyes cast an eerie blue hue in the growing darkness that mired the place, as clouds of crackling red lightning joined the power of night to more quickly dim the day. Yet, even in that dying twilight, Lazarus detected a subtle nod, a barely perceptible inclination of the Inquisitor's large head that spoke volumes.
Fine.
The saint agreed with a wave of his hand.
Then let us move past this. We won't mention the Atlas of Steel at this meeting to honor the gift you're giving to us. And I will agree to an exchange of 2/3 of your soldiers and all of the civilians as long as we do end up leaving here with some kind of ceasefire. If that is not worked out, then there is no exchange aside from what you have promised us. Agreed?
Ahsoka looked hopefully over at Obi-Wan, a smile growing at the edges of her lips as he nodded.
Agreed.
The Jedi stated simply.
With another heavy sigh, reaching up to scratch the back of his head for a moment, Lazarus shifted his gaze to the Commissar.
Colonel Leros, how quickly can it be done?
He asked. Gritting her teeth as if in active pain, she gave a curt nod and began to answer.
Most of our prisoners are in camps and fortresses around the planet. It will take time to gather them all.
Leros turned away from the group, her top teeth sliding over her bottom lip as she internally considered the logistics of everything involved.
Our local forces are currently holding them. After these negotiations,
she said, speaking the last word with an undeniably mocking tone.
I will have to send Valkyries out with some of our senior staff to release the prisoners. When they return, they'll bring the remaining prisoners and personnel to our central location. The others will be the Republic's responsibility.
The scar-faced woman concluded, sitting down and resting an elbow against the table.
Very well, but Republic gunships will serve as an escort.
Obi-Wan said firmly. Leros grunted, vaguely agreeing to the stipulation.
As part of our demand,
Lazarus suddenly added,
the Valkyries we send out must be allowed to retrieve not only our people and prisoners, but our remaining supplies as well. This includes food, water, medical equipment, and anything we can carry back.
He stated, his voice hard, unyielding. Ahsoka looked like she might disagree, but bit her lip instead, looking back to Obi-Wan, but it was not he who began to respond.
So long as you do not attempt to gather any further weapons of devastation you could use to further wound Axum or its people.
Jocasta Nu interjected, and Obi-Wan nodded his assent.
Indeed, we have no issue with you gathering most of your supplies, but your weapons are a different matter altogether. We would be dangerously foolish to condone an escalation of this process.
He added. The words seemed to taint the expression of every Imperial at the table. Even the stoic 1313 could not help but seem as though he had just caught a face full of a vile smell.
Without weapons, we cannot defend ourselves. Is that what you wish? You want us to cower on our knees while you take everything?
Leros snapped, Farnes and 1313 nodding in unconscious agreement with the Commissar.
Almost.
Ahsoka snapped, face creasing in obvious frustration. She rested back in her seat, watching Leros with intense eyes.
Our purpose in coming to this planet was to stop the suffering and murder of the people here. Allowing you to retrieve any weapons, especially the kind that can level a city, wouldn't exactly keep anyone safe. I don't care if you cower or not, stand or sit or kneel, I really don't care. But we cannot allow you to take those kinds of armaments to your temple, or any weapons at all, really.
She explained, her expression stony and unyielding.
We demand peace, nothing more, nothing less.
Obi-Wan stated.
And we cannot have that while you hold yourselves and this planet hostage. You will either surrender or destroy the remainder of your weaponry.
He explained to the sour-faced Imperials across from him. Lazarus slammed his fist into the table, causing it to rattle.
Out of the question!
He barked, though was brought up short as Obi-Wan held up his hand.
We are not merely asking for a ceasefire for this. In exchange, we are prepared to allow your Imperium to annex the grounds surrounding your temple and create a legal sanctuary for your...
The Jedi Master attempted to explain, only to be cut off by Lazarus's raised fist, which he slammed down against the table a second time.
Out of the question!
He emphasized, face red behind the mask. Obi-Wan, however, was not surprised by Lazarus's reaction. He turned his palms skyward in a calming gesture.
I understand your concern. However, as a legal political sanctuary, no one would ever attempt...
Again, Lazarus interrupted Obi-Wan, shaking his head and waving his metal hand as if to ward off an annoying fly.
Just stop.
If you have any hope of us leaving this place as anything less than enemies, then you will stop this line of thinking." The Saint stated, taking a deep breath as he tried to reel himself in.
You are more than your weapons. Will you not surrender them to save your lives?
Jocasta Nu interjected, tilting her head. The Imperial Saint rested back in his seat, sighing. Coldly, he crossed his arms over his chest and began to speak. "Understand this, Witch Lords. I am an Imperial Calambian patriot and a living saint of the Ecclesiarchy. Weapons are literally a part of my religion, and surrendering them is simply, as I have stated, out of the question. There is no bribe or boon, no promise of political sanctuary that will change that fact. Every single person here is ready to die several times before we make ourselves completely helpless to your kind." The double-headed saint growled out, his voice caught between tight, frustrated control and rage at the idea of such a suggestion. The other Imperials nodded, agreeing with the saint's statement unanimously. Farnes and 1313 gripped their weapons tightly as they sat or stood beside their respective charges, as if the witches might attempt to yank them from their very hands. Obi-Wan sighed, shaking his head and rubbing his temples.
In all due fairness, we've seen what these weapons you wield can do.
He countered.
Your people are responsible for immeasurable carnage in this battle alone. And as we've already stated, letting you destroy more of this planet is not in line with our objectives here.
The Jedi tried to explain.
Too bad. Being rendered helpless is not within our objectives either.
Samael said firmly, backing the saint up.
Well, we are going to have to find some compromise here.
Ahsoka said, looking between them all.
Allowing you to kill more people and further damage this planet is against our religion.
She pointed out.
So unless we want to get stuck in it...
The young warrior began to press forward, only to be cut off. "Your religion is nothing but soiled heretical lies! No, we will not disarm and place ourselves at your mercy for the sake of your so-called beliefs!" Lyros shot back, drawing a deep scowl from Ahsoka.
Oh, our religion is lies?
She snapped at the commissar, leaning forward.
Your religion is...
Ahsoka began to say, starting to stand. Obi-Wan shot her a stern glance, his hand landing on her shoulder and forcing Ahsoka to slump back into her seat. Shaking his head, Obi-Wan placed a palm on the table.
Look.
He started, his voice stiff.
Let's say we agree to the ceasefire and allow you to keep some of your weapons. Not the large explosives, mind you. St. Lazarus, what can you offer me if I agree to that?
The Jedi Master bargained. Lazarus raised a hand almost right into the commissar's face, anticipating Lyros's curse-laden response, and rightly so. He rubbed his exposed chin with his flesh hand, eyeing Ahsoka Tano and the other two as he thought about Obi-Wan's offer. "I will limit the kind of weapons we retrieve, as you suggest. I will also release all Republic and civilian property we confiscated and are not currently relying on." He paused then, thinking hard before nodding to himself and pressing on. "In addition, I will surrender my lasgun to you, in full view of all present, as a promise that, if this ceasefire breaks, it will not be our side which breaks it first." The final item on his list drew the most incredulous stares from his peers, though no one spoke to countermand him. "But I will agree to these terms only if 3 conditions are met," he added, extending a finger toward Obi-Wan.
Go on.
Obi-Wan encouraged, nodding for him to continue. "First, when concerning all weapons and technology which we are unable or unwilling to retrieve, we must have the option to safely destroy or otherwise dispose of it without the Republic's aid or involvement. he stipulated before raising another finger, taking a moment.
With the exception of reasonable oversight, I assume?
The Jedi Master across from him asked in the time given. What kind of oversight? The Saint growled, leaning in closer.
The kind that will prevent anyone from triggering something untoward. We don't exactly have a lot of trust built up, and even if your word is true, we wouldn't want the clandestine efforts of some misguided fanatics to damage the work we are doing here, right?
Obi-Wan laid out lightly. Lazarus grimaced deeply but nodded. Of course not. He muttered, tone low and reluctant.
Then we are in agreement.
The Jedi concluded for them both.
Please continue.
Secondly, all of your void and airships which are larger than a troop transport or dropship will clear our airspace. I will not agree to disarm in any capacity while your death wedges hover over us. Lazarus insisted, his eyes moving between the three delegates before him.
Yes, I understand your reasoning, and it's a legitimate concern.
Obi-Wan stated with ease.
And what of your third demand?
The Master pressed. Lazarus's eyes narrowed dangerously then. A hostage exchange. The skull-faced Saint stated.
Huh?
Ahsoka asked, eyebrows skewing.
Aren't we already exchanging prisoners?
She stated, looking to Obi-Wan for clarification. Obi-Wan shook his head, his jaw grimly set.
That is not the kind of exchange he's referring to, Ahsoka.
The Jedi answered under his breath. We do not need to determine who right now. Lazarus said. But before we leave to release our prisoners and limit our own weapons, you and I will meet again and exchange 2 hostages, one from my side and one from yours. If you betray our pact, then your hostage will die. If I betray mine, then... Lazarus explained, twirling his wrist in an obvious gesture. Silence filled the space between them. The flash of the nearby lightning storm vibrated through the ground, trembling the table.
Very well, agreed.
The Jedi Master said at length, drawing out his last word. Ahsoka's expression fell, but she bit her tongue, waiting to see how Obi-Wan would play this out.
However,
Obi-Wan added suddenly,
we must agree to the level of care afforded to the hostages. They will be considered political hostages, not prisoners of war. The care of the Republic hostage must be guaranteed, just as the health and well-being of the Imperial hostage will be. We will arrange inspections of both hostages for either side to ensure that these levels of care are being maintained.
The Jedi Master stipulated.
I imagine that the hostages will be of general importance, and as such, we will need safety precautions on their behalf, for both Imperial and Republic sides.
He concluded. Lazarus nodded, his skull face bobbing. Right, yes, I agree to this. He acquiesced. Ahsoka shook her head then and stood.
Hold on now.
The former Padawan interjected, face rotten with concern and frustration.
I didn't sign up to put anyone else in danger. This hostage thing is barbaric. Enforcing a treaty by holding a gun to each other's heads is...
She started to say,
We aren't going to take civilians hostage.
Samael interrupted from his seat, gaining the gathering's attention.
Whoever we accept as the Republic's exchange will need to be a member of the Republic military, leadership, or at least a member of the Jedi Order.
He clarified as he blew a thick cloud of smoke in Ahsoka's direction. Ahsoka scowled, waving her hand before her face to cast the smoke away.
So what?
She snapped back at the grinning man.
My point still...
She started to say, but was cut off again.
No, it does not.
The Inquisitor stated, voice as hard as stone.
You don't have a say in this, because you are representing civilians, and civilians are not involved. So, with all due respect to Miss Tano, I have to request
He paused, spitting out a spent sag from his lips.
That you keep your mouth shut and know your place in this. You're going to get your people back. Keep interfering where you have no business to, and you may get nothing at all.
He warned dangerously. Ahsoka's face grew hot and flushed. She wasn't about to cower away. She was no child to be chastised or ridiculed. The former Padawan opened her mouth to argue, but Obi-Wan raised his hand, forcing back her words. She shot him a glare, and he shot her an intense glance in return. Taking a deep breath to calm herself, she wordlessly nodded and sat back down, gritting her teeth behind her tight lips. Jocasta tapped on the table, the small gesture demanding the attention of those gathered there.
We agree to your hostage exchange,
she affirmed, her eyes redirecting forward, squinting slightly at the sudden press of the presence within St. Lazarus's mask.
However, in return, when choosing which Republic prisoner to release, I request that you release the Jedi among them first and all others after.
She insisted sternly but calmly.
Fine. You can have your orders people back first,
Samael said, forcing aside any other arguments as he suddenly leaned forward and took the lead in the discussion.
However, before we go any further, I want to recommend the hostage we want from the Republic,
he stated almost casually while retrieving another low stick. Obi-Wan nodded at the large man, his face creased, waiting to hear who the Inquisitor had in mind to trade.
We will take your request under advisement at the very least. Whom did you have in mind?
He asked. Samael smiled, revealing his tombstone grin. He took a long drag, the lit stick clenched between those large teeth, glowing brightly.
General Anakin Skywalker,
was his response. For once, the Space Marines were silent, standing straight-backed and stiff like ceramite statues. Each bore their weapon in their hands, and it was easy for the young mercenary to see that they were only barely not aiming them at the chittering swarm of aliens or their massive transport. But then, a certain Marine had to go and break the stoicism just when Fett was starting to admire it.
I don't like it,
Yannick grumbled, lip tugging up on one side, exposing his fangs as he spoke. The six-limbed wolf at his feet seemed to agree, releasing a growl every time any of the small, red-robed aliens came too close. The clone pointedly ignored them both, face creasing in a mild scowl, but not from the Marine's words. Before him, a small, chittering ambassador of the smelly horde of Jawas tried, for the third time, to make him a bad offer.
This won't work,
Fett told the small, bright-eyed alien whilst gesturing towards the spidery droid it was attempting to sell them.
We need a specific kind of power converter, one which converts plasma cells into usable electricity for an FP standard power system.
He specified for the fourth time. It exclaimed excitedly, jabbing a finger towards the droid in question several times. Small, hidden feet kicking the sand.
No, I don't need something to install one.
Fett tried to explain, sighing heavily and rubbing his temples before looking to his left, eyes finding the large, darkly armored Space Marine who was waiting, arms crossed as he leaned against one of the buildings. The Iron Father snorted hard through his nose, a glassy, green nodule on his heavily augmented armor glittering before projecting a foggy green hologram of the desired part, rotating slowly in the air before him. A migraine pain flashed through Boba's head, barely able to keep himself from sending a rude gesture at the smug, dismissive Space Marine.
Right.
He said, emphasizing the T at the end of the word as he reoriented his eyes towards the Jawa.
We need that.
The clone stated, kneeling down closer to the Jawa and pointing at the hologram.
A plasma power converter.
The young mercenary said, speaking slowly and piece by piece.
Bawa tahu itu, tupanin. Laka cek akan. Ibi, dupa pini tahu itu. Buah ibi, rakabit, rakaputu, soba ribata.
It jabbered in response.
Okay, but they need to have an adaptable...
Fett began to say, but the Jawa had already spun around and retreated with a scampering run back towards the lowered ramp of its massive sandcrawler, snapping out a few commands at the others it passed, who followed after him.
I don't see the point of even entertaining these smelt rats, or whatever it is you sand eaters know them as.
Yannick growled to the sighing clone once it was evident that they would need to wait, the Ironfather hearing them despite the distance and snorting again in agreement.
They're called Jawas.
Boba explained, voice terse.
And as annoying as they are, unless any of you can produce that power converter, then we either deal with them or haul ourselves all the way back and buy it at 10 times the price from Jabba.
He finished, crossing his arms, armor hot under the constant glare of the suns above.
At least that Jabba creature has an accord with Commissar Kane.
Yannick grumbled, bringing a derisive snort from Fett almost instantly.
What?
The Space Marine asked with a few raised eyebrows.
Look, I'll tell you what I told the old general.
Boba began to say before the Astartes cut him off.
Commissar.
Yannick corrected quickly.
Whatever.
Boba said back with a dismissive shrug.
My point is that Jabba is one of the slimiest, most sadistic slugs that ever crawled out of a spawning pool, and the only thing that keeps him cordial with all of you are your guns and advantage. Once either of those dry up...
The clone said, shaking his head.
Well, let's just say that there better be something else in the wings to stay on his good side, or he'll turn all of Tatooine on you in a day.
The Merc elaborated.
That won't ever dry up.
The Ironfather said, drawing their gazes as he pushed off from the side of the building and with a growl stomped back inside.
Heresy.
The senior Astartes muttered as he disappeared within the slightly smoky interior. Boba sighed and Yannick shook his head.
He's right though, whelp.
The younger Marine added after a moment.
We've been maintaining our war gear for over 10,000 years. It'll be a cold Pherisian day in the hottest hell before we run out of bolters or bolts to fire. We'll find a way to keep ourselves stocked and ready.
Mm-hmm. And what if you start lacking for hands to wield them with?
The young Fett pointed out. Yannick scowled deeply, and Falagi growled from between Yannick's legs, where the wolf lay in the sand, tail flicking from side to side.
What are you implying, whelp?
He asked dangerously. However, the clone seemed unfazed.
That there are more ways to kill a man, even a space marine, than with a straight fight. If you all start dropping from skirmishes and attrition, then it won't matter how many guns or bullets you have. They'll all end up buried in the sand.
The mercenary explained.
Jabba doesn't have to fight you directly. He just has to wait for Tatooine to wear you down. Maybe even finish you off. And if you are all ever relying on him to save you, and there isn't a hand with an Imperial gun near his head at the time, well...
Boba continued.
He's a Xenos. We wouldn't expect anything less.
Yannick finished for him, resting his remaining hand on his waist as they both watched the Jawa running back with a power converter held over its head. The creature chittered excitedly.
Hold your orbacks. I've got to check it first.
Fett said, taking the heavy component from the Jawa and grunting as he hauled it to a small tarp they had laid out beforehand. Fett was no engineer, or at least no master engineer, but he knew enough to spot obvious damage or corrosion, and thanks to the schematics provided by the Ironfather, The clone also had a good idea of what to look for. Ultimately, it would be for that senior space marine to decide if the part was up to snuff, but Bubba knew it was better to check it himself before poking that old wolf again. Almost a half hour later, and after shaking out a lot of sand from the components, the mercenary nodded to himself and sat back.
Looks good.
He said softly, rubbing his chin with one hand and shading his eyes with the other. The converter wasn't the right size, and it did appear different in several ways from the schematics of the Imperial equivalent. However, they were never going to get an Imperial power converter from a bunch of Jawas, so, in lieu of that, this seemed close enough. He stood, pulling himself to his feet and placing on his helmet. Yannick eyed him as he rose, his expression still scrunched with suspicion, but tempered somewhat.
You trust that pile of scrap will actually work then?
He questioned, Falagi underlining his question with an anxious whine. Fetch shrugged his shoulders and shook the component a bit more, getting some more sand to trickle out.
It'll have to. This isn't the core, and beggars don't get to be choosers in the middle of the Dune Sea.
He concluded. The young clone glanced back to where the rest of the Marines waited, still as statues, their glaring eyes fixed on the surrounding Jawas.
Let's get this to the Iron Father. You'll have to make sure it's useful before we pay for it.
He said to the protest of the little alien in front of him. The Jawa ambassador chittered impatiently, its small fingers motioning for payment.
Buah, batavit, puto nipta! Nini, vitri, ujik! Nini, nipta!
It squeaked and jabbered. Boba lifted a gloved finger, silencing the Jawa's eager demands.
Not until he clears it.
Boba muttered, gesturing with his chin towards the doorway the Iron Father had vanished through. The Jawa's response was a stream of rapid, indignant jabbering, its eyes flashing as it tried to bargain, hands outstretched in fervent appeal.
Look.
Boba said slowly, bending down.
You'll get paid once our big technician says this is good. No tricks. You get right back if it's no good. If it is good, then we pay.
The Jawa narrowed its beady, glowing eyes, but seemed to understand, crossing its arms and nodding begrudgingly.
Raka, ibi! Nita, laka, jek, vit, ra, riki! We do pi, patari, siki, bini! Vit, ra, ri, jakamota!
The creature added at a feverish pace. Those words did have Fett taking a pause. Yannick raised an eyebrow.
What did it say?
He asked the young merc.
He wants to agree to what we will pay him if we decide to take the part.
Boba said, frowning behind his armor. Yannick gave a lopsided shrug.
Fine. What do they want?
He asked dismissively.
A single suit of your powered battle armor.
Fett said dubiously.
Out of the question,
Was Yannick's fast reply. Boba chuckled.
You don't say.
He said to Yannick before turning to address the Jawa.
Look, they would sooner cook and eat all of you before even consider...
Boba began to explain, but as he turned back, he could see that the Jawa was already running, dashing as quickly as its little feet could scurry beneath its red robe, chittering and crying out high-pitched warnings as it did. Looking around, the clone could see that, indeed, all of the Jawas were running and tripping over each other to try to get back to their sandcrawler. Yannick began to boom a laugh as Falagi got up, resting no longer and instead growling deeply, every hair standing on end.
Looks like you scared them off, whelp!
Yannick laughed, tossing his head back as he did, but Boba was not laughing, as he slowly turned his head back to look towards Yannick, and then beyond him. Though the Space Marine could not see the clone's eyes bulging behind his helmet, he got a sense of Fett's shock anyway, and turned around. Rising in the distance and racing towards them was an enormous column of sand.
A sandstorm?
Yannick asked, looking up at it, but Boba shook his head.
That's no storm. That's either the biggest herd of Bampas I've ever seen, stampeding in the same direction,
the clone began to say.
Or it's a throne-damned army.
Yannick finished for him, Boba nodding in response to no one in particular as all eyes turned to watch and marvel at the approach of 3 tribes of Tusken raiders, their distant war cries and drums echoing like thunder across the rolling dunes. The Wolf Lord, astride his massive beast of war, suddenly rode between them and the vision of sand and war which approached. He broke their trance with a focused stare.
Fett, get that component where it needs to be, now!
He growled, and Boba nodded hastily.
Yannick, go unload the Voxcaster and bring it here.
The massive Marine continued, Yannick giving a one-armed salute in response.
Aye, Lord!
He said before dashing away to do as ordered.
The rest of you.
The Lord of the Marines said, wheeling his wolf around to view the remaining Marines.
Dig in and prepare to bear your fangs. By the All-Father, I'll be skinned and hung before I give up a single grain of sand.
When the blackest midnights smother the pyres, their ember hearts ignite the voided sky, and every thundered war cry cannot die. Loreward sentinels, shoulder to the gale, beneath twin crimson moons their fates prevail. Judgment incarnate, razor swift unseen, no shadowed foe escapes their silver sheen. We ride the stars, we sunder sands, by tooth and clail. We bear the All-Father stern commands, by tooth and clail. We are the wolves of snow and sky. We are the lamb. Before our charge, fell gods must die. From granite peaks to abyssal veil, our covenant is hammered, never frail. Through tempest wild, our axes align. The All-Father's wrath through us shall shine. Merciless, pitiless, we break the shield. Outgunned, outnumbered, yet never to yield. Triumphant, exalted, our verdict is just. These deeds are etched in crimson rust. We ride the stars, we sunder sands, by tooth and claw. We bear the All-Father stern commands, by tooth and claw. We are the wolves of snow and sky. We are the now. Before our charge, fell gods must die. Amid cosmic wars and sable night, our courage blazes, hearts alight, with mortal